Radio Television on RT1 now. We join Eileen Dunn for Wednesday's main evening news.
Crisis in the European Union as José Manuel Barroso climbs down and withdraws his commission just hours before MEPs were set to reject it. Storms batter southern and eastern coasts and are now spreading northwards. A new video of Margaret Hassan, who again appeals for the British to leave Iraq. And Brian Cowan disagrees with the unions on the need to refocus social partnership. Good evening and welcome. A test of strength between the European Commission and MEPs has plunged the Union into crisis tonight. Parliament won the first round when the new EU President, José Manuel Barroso, was forced into a humiliating withdrawal of his commission. MEPs, angered at the Italian Commissioner's controversial views on homosexuality and the role of women, had threatened to veto the whole cabinet. So it's back to the drawing board for Mr Barroso, but Italy has deepened the crisis by insisting tonight that it's standing by its nominee.
In the face-off between the Parliament and the Commission, it was the Commission that blinked first.
I need more time to look at this issue. In these circumstances, I have decided not to submit a new Commission for your approval today.
The MEPs cheered Mr Barroso's decision to call a time-out rather than risk almost certain defeat in a vote. They sense victory. By forcing Mr Barroso to back down, they've increased the power of the Parliament.
If Buttiglione comes back, fine, but put him into another job where he can have his beliefs, he can have everything that he wants, but he cannot affect the fundamental rights of ordinary men and women of the European Union in a negative way.
But others think it sets a bad precedent.
Nobody should be forced to resign because of a witch hunt. You know, if you were truly liberal about your approach towards the Commission, well, then you should accept that there are people from different backgrounds, different viewpoints.
It was Rocco Buttiglione's conservative views on gays, women and immigration that threatened to bring down the Commission. Most MEPs now hope a simple reshuffle of Commission jobs will solve the crisis. But if Mr Buttiglione is forced out or quits, Conservatives will almost certainly demand the sacking of 3 or 4 other commissioners from the Liberal, Socialist and Green parties. It could be Christmas before a new commission is in place. In the meantime, the old Prodi Commission will have to cancel their retirement plans and stay on. The next move is Rocco Buttiglione's. Does he quit this commission? Does he take another portfolio? Or does he try and tough it out? Sean Whelan, RTE News, Strasbourg.
Dublin-born Margaret Hassan, who's being held hostage in Iraq, has issued a fresh appeal for Britain to pull troops out of Iraq. In a third video of the aid worker to be aired on Al Jazeera television since she was kidnapped last week, she also called for the release of all female Iraqi prisoners.
The Arabic television station Al Jazeera aired the latest video to emerge of the Irish-born hostage. We can't hear her speaking, but the station's reports say that she's again asked for British troops to be pulled out of Iraq. She's also urged CARE International, the aid agency she works for, to close its office in Baghdad. And in a plea reminiscent of those made by the British hostage Ken Bigley before he was killed, she's appealed for the release of female Iraqi prisoners. Kidnapped last Tuesday, Margaret Hassan's captors remain unknown, but her third appeal comes on a day when, far from withdrawing from Iraq, some 850 British troops have begun moving deeper into the country and into more dangerous territory. They're to be redeployed near Baghdad, a move agreed by the British government last week in response to an American request to free up US troops to fight insurgents in trouble spots like Fallujah. Margaret Hassan wasn't the only hostage held in Iraq to appear in a video released today. 24-year-old Japanese national Shoshi Koda is the latest foreign hostage to be held by a group led by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi.
They want to withdraw the Japanese troops from Iraq.
His captors say they'll kill him within 48 hours if the Japanese government fails to comply. But Tokyo says it will not pull Japanese troops out of Iraq. Laura Fletcher, RTE News.
To the US next, where the political fates of George Bush and John Kerry rest on what combination of voters, new, young or minority, turn out and in what numbers for next Tuesday's presidential election. 4 years ago, turnout was around 50%. This time it's expected to be 60%. And as our Washington correspondent Carol Coleman now reports from Ohio, the increase will be in part due to multi-million-dollar campaigns by both sides to get people voting.
Can President Bush count on your support?
Hello, this is
All right.
Turnout, turnout, turnout. That's the key to this race, and both parties are trying to get as many of their core supporters as possible to the polls next Tuesday. In a windowless room in Columbus, Ohio, volunteers are working the phones, contacting people 2 and 3 times if necessary to make sure they come and vote.
To me, this is the most critical election of my lifetime, and one that will affect the life of my children and grandchildren for years to come. So whatever I can do to help President Bush get reelected is just so critical.
All across this country, there are thousands of groups of people gathered together just like this. Everyone here is a volunteer, giving several hours a day of their own free time to help get out the vote. In this case, they're rooting for President Bush. The Democrats, too, have spent tens of millions of dollars on get-out-the-vote drives. At the rallies, the candidates energize the troops. Then it's up to the troops to do the legwork.
There's a lot of ways you can go to your Democratic office in your area, and you can just go help. You can sign up for volunteer sessions. You can go pass out flyers, just let people know like when it is and when they can go to vote, how they can do it.
And I'm going to be helping on Election Day as well, going around driving elderly people to the polls.
The Get Out the Vote drive has resulted in millions of new registrations this time, but in Ohio, Republicans are challenging thousands of them, fearing fraud from the Democratic side.
There's concern. I've been calling older people, and they're really concerned about what the Democratic Party is doing to tie up the election afterwards and not let the electoral process go as it has in the past for generations.
The multi-million-dollar ground war has ensured that turnout could be up to 60% this time. The problem will be whether everyone who wants to vote can vote. Carol Coleman, RTE News, Columbus, Ohio.
The Minister for Finance, Brian Cowen, said tonight that he disagreed with the Congress of Trade Unions' view that social partnerships should be refocused away from low taxes so that more money could be raised to fund public services. But he said he was in agreement with the central bank's new projection of economic growth of about 5% for next year. However, he refused to comment on the bank's view that there was no need for a giveaway budget in December.
Brian Cowen was speaking tonight at a book launch for the Irish Taxation Institute in Dublin. He outlined his belief that promoting economic growth rather than raising taxes was the key to providing the resources to fund public services. And he flatly rejected the call last week from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions for a shift to a high tax regime to fund public services.
This attempt to suggest that those who are committed to a competitive low taxation regime are in some ways not as committed to improving social provision simply doesn't stand up to the factual basis which I just outlined.
So, Minister, you think that the Irish Congress of Trade Unions has got it wrong when they call for a complete reshaping and refocusing of social partnership with that agenda, a high tax agenda?
Well, I had a very good discussion with ICTU at their pre-budget meeting yesterday evening, and obviously we agreed to disagree on that question.
Mr. Cowen agreed with the prognosis from the central bank earlier today that our economy should grow by about 5% next year. However, he would not comment on the central bank's recommendation that there's no need for a giveaway budget on December the 1st.
And as you know, George, we don't discuss that coming into the budget, especially for my first one. It's a question really of making sure that the economic engine of the economy continues to grow, and that involves investment.
So the message from the central bank is that the economy is back growing close to its own potential. It's on an even keel and doing quite well. The message to the government is don't force the economy to grow any faster than it currently is, and certainly don't cause any imbalances in areas like inflation where none already exist. George Lee, RTE News at the central bank.
The first major storm of the autumn hit the south coast this evening and is now making its way northwards. So far, the heavy rain and strong winds have been mainly in the south and southeast. Cork city centre is having its worst flooding in 40 years, but water levels are receding slowly. Waterford city centre remains flooded along the main quay and there have been traffic diversions. Coastal towns and villages along the south and southeast coasts have also been affected. Flooding has also been reported further north in Athlone. Our first report tonight comes from Jenny O'Sullivan in Cork.
Any port in a storm, or in this case a railing, as people making their way home at tea time this evening were ambushed by unexpected high levels of floodwaters in Cork city centre. Flooding had been expected in low-lying areas such as Oliver Plunkett Street and the South Terrace, and warnings had been issued. But no one anticipated that high easterly winds and day-long heavy rains would cause water levels to swell to 2.9 metres and the river to breach its banks. According to city officials, the last time Cork city centre saw flooding as bad as this was in 1962, when levels topped 3 metres. The bad weather conditions also forced a number of flights from Cork Airport to be diverted to Shannon and Kerry, and delays tonight of up to 4 hours. Even the newly refurbished Patrick Street couldn't cope with the levels of flood waters which rose up from blocked underground drains. Businesses that should have been shutting up shop for the day were unexpectedly faced with rising floodwaters in a battle to protect themselves.
But we haven't got any sandbags or anything, so we're just afraid that it's going to come in the front door now here, and literally it would shut us down in the morning.
As businesses begin to count the cost of tonight's damage, with early estimates in the millions, the city's fire service is still dealing with hundreds of flood calls.
There's also reports this evening of widespread flooding in the county in areas such as Carrigaline, Passage West and Youghal, where there's 2 feet of water in the main street. Access to the great island of Cove was cut off for 3 hours, but traffic is now getting through, albeit slowly.
Tonight, Gardaí are warning that this evening's floods could be repeated in the morning, with high tide due at 6:20. They're advising people to avoid the city centre between 5 and 8 o'clock. Jenny O'Sullivan, RTE News, Cork.
This has been described as probably the worst flooding in decades in Waterford city centre. Some cars desperately tried to get through the high tide at 7 p.m. Some did. These people weren't so lucky.
The car itself is actually starting to float at this moment, so we just have to abandon it.
Dozens of cars were abandoned in car parks on the quay, even some buses, and there was added danger at certain corners. A part of the famous Granville Hotel was flooded, even the high barrier not able to hold back the tide. Some American tourists couldn't believe it.
Did you ever take a sea condition like this in Ireland, did you?
No, I didn't. It was beautiful when I got here.
There's also been considerable flood damage in Dungarvan, Passage East, Dunmore East and other coastal towns and villages. For some, the sandbags didn't stop the flood waters. Even one pub was flooded in places. Back in the city as the floods rose, it's difficult to know how this car managed to get through. Damien Tiernan, RTE News, Waterford.
Well, as we saw earlier, that Cork was badly hit this evening, and for an update on the situation now, we're going over to our correspondent Pascal Sheehy in Cork. Pascal, what's the situation there tonight?
Well, Eileen, we had hoped for some improvement after tea time when the high tide would subside. That simply hasn't come. The problem is the tide is flowing in this direction, but winds blowing from the southeast are blowing in that direction, and they're preventing the tidal waters flowing out of Cork Harbour. The result is that very many streets in Cork city centre tonight are under several feet of water, and that situation is replicated around the lower harbour area in places like Cove, Carrigaline, Monkstown, Passage West. They are all also under several feet of water. And further inland, there's concern growing now in the Blackwater Valley because pressure is mounting there. Water pressure is growing, and there is concern for the towns of Mallow and Fermoy that they might flood tomorrow. Okay. And the worst part is that there may be more to come in the morning. High tide is due again at 6:20 in the morning here in Cork city centre. As you heard there in Jenny O'Sullivan's report, the Gardaí are warning people to stay away from Cork city centre in the morning between the hours of 5 and 8. Such is the situation. So for now, we're underwater here in Cork, and there may be worse to come.
All right, Pascal, thank you for that. Well, they tell us the worst of the weather has yet to hit Dublin. Our reporter Annette O'Donnell joins us now from Dublin Docks. What's the situation there, Annette?
Well, Eileen, as you can probably tell, the worst of the weather is really starting to bite here now on the east coast. It was a wet and miserable day, but the storms really are picking up. The ESB dealt with power outages to around 2,500 homes today, but most of that has been restored, but we can expect more difficulties probably throughout the night if this is to continue. Our colleagues in AA Road Watch are telling us that obviously road conditions are getting particularly bad at the moment, and people are asked to drive, if they need to at all, with extreme caution. There have also been a number of ferry sailings cancelled, although the Ulysses here behind me is hoping to sail, but that has already been delayed. A number of Irish Ferries passengers were stranded off the coast of Wales earlier on today when the captain of the ferry deemed it too dangerous to dock. But the Met Éireann are also telling us that we can expect, as you might see, flooding later on tonight all along the east coast. There's a very high tide due just around midnight, but the people around me here in Ringsend, the East Wall and in Drumcondra will be hoping that it's nothing along the scale of 2 years ago. But as you can tell, it looks like it's going to be pretty bad. Back to you in the warm studio.
Thank you, Annette. Well, indeed, Met Éireann have been telling us that with tonight's full moon, high tides and continuing rain, there is a strong possibility of flooding all along the east coast.
Their peak now during these last few hours of Wednesday, and they'll continue very strong through the early hours of Thursday. We expect the strongest winds in South Leinster and East Munster. That's where the gusts, I think, could be up to 70 or 80 miles per hour. And the winds are going to ease off only very slowly through the latter part of the night and through tomorrow. So in all, we're going to have strong winds for probably more than 24 hours, which is quite unusual.
And there we take a break, but still to come on the 9 o'clock news. A bouncer who claims he was groped by Eamon Dunphy goes on trial for making a false statement to Gardaí. And an A&E consultant says fireworks should be legalised to prevent injuries.
The Midweek Movie, starring Will Smith and Gene Hackman.
You live another day, I'll be very impressed.
Enemy of the State, after the news on RTE1.
In the evening, it's important to unwind. Try new Danone Zen when you want to relax. Mild and smooth with a unique formulation of 4 Danone cultures and magnesium. Delicious. In the evening, be Zen. New Zen from Danone.
Danone. Is your hair dry and rebellious? Does it frizz at the first sign of moisture? New Garnier Fructis Sleek and Shine. The first smoothing system with fruit micro oils for 24/7 sleek hair. No more frizz. Hair is stronger, up to 3 times smoother. Smooth hair even when moisture's in the air. Garnier Fructis Sleek and Shine. Garnier. And for ultimate sleekness, Garnier Fructis Sleek and Shine Smoothing Serum for 24/7 sleek hair.
Time for a fresh new look. Just color away the years.
With Triple Protection Excellence Cream from L'Oreal.
Absolutely beautiful color that's hassle-free.
Only Excellence has a pre-color serum that cares for and protects your hair. With a cream so rich, it doesn't drip.
Beautiful, sensational, softer than silk. And not a single gray. Assuming you have any. Want to color away the years? Now you can. With Triple Protection Excellence Cream from L'Oreal Paris.
Worldwide #1 for hair color.
You can't avoid your phone bill, but there could be an easier way to reduce the cost of your phone calls. With Tele2, a national evening call is only 1.1 cent a minute, compared with 4.92 cent a minute with Eircom. Free phone Tele2 on 1-800 928 458. Tele2. Why pay more?
Welcome to part 2. Environmental groups have vowed to step up their efforts to prevent the construction of incinerators at Ringaskiddy in Cork and Carronstown in Meath after the Environmental Protection Agency announced its intention to grant both facilities a waste licence. The 2 plants could be operational within 3 years.
The EPA adjudicates whether plans for factories will actually result in them operating to the highest international standards. Today it decided the Cork and Meath incinerators will, and therefore should be granted draft waste licences. The public has 28 days to object, and the EPA board will then either grant a final licence or hold an oral hearing. The company which will run both incinerators, Indaver Ireland, is relatively upbeat about the EPA's licensing conditions.
We have had only a couple of hours to assess them, and the EPA does appear to have exceeded the EU requirements for operating of an incinerator, and we're studying those conditions in particular, but our initial assessment is that we would be able to comply with the licence.
The plant at Carronstown near Duleek in County Meath will deal with non-hazardous waste. However, the Ringaskiddy incinerator in Cork is due to become Ireland's first facility to deal in part with hazardous waste. Even before today, anti-incineration groups there were hostile to the EPA because its Director General previously worked for IBEC and a director previously worked for Indaver.
It certainly questions the independence of the EPA, and it certainly does nothing in terms of the faith that the communities have in the EPA and their independence, because there's just effectively another arm of the government.
Today's decision is very significant, but it's by no means the end of the matter. Anti-incineration protesters are going to the High Court shortly in order to try and challenge the basis under which the Ringaskiddy plant secured planning permission. Paul Cunningham, RTE News.
An elderly man who lived just metres from Monaghan General Hospital died after he had to be brought 45 kilometres to Cavan General following a heart attack. The 72-year-old man, named locally as Benny McCullough from Monaghan Town, suffered the heart attack yesterday at his home. Despite intensive efforts to revive him, he was later pronounced dead at Cavan General Hospital. Monaghan Hospital hasn't been taking emergency cases since July 2002. An end to celibacy, a greater role for women and no more managing schools. That's what the majority of Irish priests want, according to a new survey in the Irish Catholic newspaper. However, most clergy say that abolishing the celibacy rule won't increase vocations.
The weekly paper sent its anonymous questionnaire to virtually every diocesan parish priest and curate on the island, and 42% of them replied. Asked if their compulsory celibacy rule should be changed, 57% said yes, while 40% disagreed. However, when asked if abolishing compulsory celibacy would increase vocations, only 37% said yes, while 60% said no.
We're changed so often. You can't change a married man and change him from one place to another every few years. You've got the whole, problem of schooling of children and everything. I mean, logistically, it would be a huge thing. It's very easy to say it should be done, but I think it's something that could be planned for over, a decade or two.
Asked if there should be Sunday school for children preparing for First Communion and Confirmation, 65% said yes, while 31% disagreed. Father Tierney says secular celebrations are now overshadowing many children's introductions to the sacraments, giving rise to this demand for more parental involvement.
It wouldn't be unusual, for instance, to see people coming to the sacraments like in chauffeured Rolls Royces.
3 out of 4 priests surveyed said they believe their church didn't sufficiently recognise the role of women, which raises the tantalising question which this survey did not ask and which the Pope still forbids. Should the Catholic Church begin ordaining women? Joe Little, RTE News at Killagrange in Dublin.
A 25-year-old Dublin bouncer who claims he was groped by the broadcaster Eamon Dunphy has gone on trial accused of making a false statement to Gardaí. David Heatley claims the indecent assault took place outside a Leeson Street nightclub in April of last year.
In April 2003, Eamon Dunphy enjoyed a night out with colleagues drinking wine and champagne. Then, as he said in court today, he was torn between kicking on or going home. He decided to kick on. He went to Buck Whaley's nightclub on Leeson Street. He recalled a bit of light-hearted banter at the door, but the club was almost over and after a look inside he left. Bouncer David Heatley told a different story to Gardaí later that night. He claimed Eamon Dunphy was aggressive to him, kissed him, slapped him on the face and groped his testicles. He's now on trial accused of making a false statement. Eamon Dunphy says nothing aggressive took place. There was no contact that he has any memory of. There wasn't a kiss, a slap, not even a caress. Another version of events was recounted by nightclub boss Stephen Newman. He said there was a kiss, or as he described it, a light-hearted peck on the cheek by Mr. Dunphy. This was after some comment about Mr. Dunphy's sexuality. There was also a slap on the face, he agreed, or as he described it, a brush on the face by Mr. Dunphy. And he said that immediately afterwards the accused, David Heatley, had said to them, "This is an assault, you all saw that." David Heatley, who worked at Cat's nightclub also on Leeson Street, then went to the Gardaí, and Mr Newman said in evidence that on his return, he said that an allegation of indecent assault against Eamon Dunphy would be worth €15,000 in an out-of-court settlement. Mr Newman said he also understood that if he backed the accused, he'd be looked after financially. Stephen Newman said he didn't want to get involved in this controversy, but he couldn't stand by and see someone's reputation taken. The trial before a jury of 7 men and 5 women continues tomorrow. Mary Wilson, RT News, the Dublin Circuit Criminal Court.
Fireworks should be legalised and licensed properly, according to one of the country's main casualty consultants. Dr Patrick Plunkett says unless the illegal importation of fireworks is tackled, serious injuries will continue.
Although the sale of fireworks is illegal, they've been disturbing the evening peace for many weeks now. Fireworks at Halloween are exciting, especially for children, but the fun can go horribly wrong.
Well, we see children presenting here to A&E in the sort of 4 weeks before Halloween and even in the weeks afterwards. And what mainly happens is it seems to be injuries associated with bangers, and it seems to be injuries that affect the hand.
A report on fireworks injuries in the latest Irish Medical Journal says fireworks are easily and cheaply available. Most injuries involve burns, damage to the hands, eyes, head and face. There's no quality or safety controls, and illegal traders are rarely charged. It says the purchase and use of fireworks has been legal in Northern Ireland since 1996, but no real increase in fireworks injuries has been seen there since. Most fireworks come into the Republic from the north, and recommends a strong campaign on safety in classrooms as well as enforcement of the law. One of the country's main casualty consultants supports a more regulated approach here.
I support careful use of properly controlled fireworks, and that requires them to be licit, legal, licensed, and the quality assured.
The National Safety Council has called on parents to pay special attention to their children around fireworks and bonfires this coming weekend. Fergal Bowers, RTE News.
Before we go, a reminder that News 2 is at 2 minutes to 11 tonight. And the main news again this evening, heavy rain and strong winds have been causing severe flooding in the south and southeast of the country tonight, with Cork and Waterford having their worst floods in decades. The bad weather is now reported to be making its way northwards. And that's Wednesday's 9 o'clock news. From all of us here, stay safe and good evening.
When you need a number in a hurry, call Aircom 11811.
Hello there, good evening to you. The pictures on the news, a graphic illustration of just how bad the weather is around about the country, and it'll continue very bad through the night. The storms will continue to rage, I think, across the south and east in particular. That's where we could see gusts up to 70 to 80 miles per hour. The worst of them probably during the next 5 or 6 hours. Further flooding, especially along the coast, really at the times of high tides. High tide in Dublin round about midnight, and up and down the east coast a couple of hours either side of that. Looking at the satellite, you can see where the storm has been coming from, this great swirl of cloud drifting up through the Bay of Biscay, and the low pressure centre, it's a deep low, is very close to our south coast just at the moment. Now we can look at the forecast cloud and see what's going to happen to that in the next couple of days. It's going to swirl around over Ireland right through the night and through tomorrow too, and then as we go on through the latter part of tomorrow, it gradually begins to ease away southwards as we go into Friday. But this storm will be with us for another 36 hours or thereabouts, though abating slowly during tomorrow. Looking at the same time frame and looking at the pressure and the rainfall, the rain, well, it's just bands of it really which are circling round about that area of low pressure. There's going to be very little respite. The rain probably tomorrow will be more showery than it was today. There could be some brightness breaking through, but those showers will be very, very heavy indeed. This is what the chart looks like on Friday then. The low still close to Land's End. They're not terribly far from our own south coast, but things improving during Friday. By Saturday, the low pressure slips away down there to the north coast of Spain. We begin to see high pressure, and for Sunday, that high pressure in over Britain and Ireland, promising a much improved weekend. We can look forward to some fine, bright and dry weather at that stage. Coming back to tonight though, those winds, they're circling around that low at the moment, the low pressure coming very close to the Cork coast as we go on through the night, and I think those winds will be at their strongest, as I mentioned, in the next 5 or 6 hours. The radar shows the bands of rain which have been moving up across the country, the first of them clearing the north coast, another across the centre at the moment, yet more coming up to the south, another very small one here just off the very southwest coast, and those bands will continue to push up across the country. Some heavy bands of rain separated by lighter areas through the night, and much the same tomorrow. The rain tomorrow, that bit more showery, but I think along the south and southeast coast it could be fairly well prolonged through the day. It'll be afternoon before it really breaks up into showers. Temperatures, well, they're not going to fall very much tonight or rise very much tomorrow. 11 to 13 degrees Celsius. Then for Friday, I think still some heavy showers through the east and south. The best of the weather in the west and north, which could have some decent dry weather with some sunshine coming through. A continuing improvement as we go on into Saturday. Fewer showers at that stage, and by Sunday it does look like we'll finally have a good day to enjoy. That's it from me then. Bye-bye.
Call Aircom 11811 for any number you need.
Online fraud is the crime, but who are the criminals? The Law and Order team investigates shortly on 2.